Hi folks, hope you're well. This is Lawrence again. I'm here with Patrick. We're going to talk about fitness, and this is, exercise is so important. It decreases your chance of mortality by 30%. It decreases your chance of heart disease, cancer, all these things. If you look at like biomarkers, and that's you have a chronological age versus biological age. Your biological age is how long you're actually going to live. And if you look at the things we're going to talk about, this is the spoiler alert here, Patrick. Everything we're going to talk about today is going to have a beneficial or positive effect on your biomarkers. So it's going to make you live longer and healthier. So this is Patrick. Hi, Patrick. Good to see you.
Nice to meet you.
Welcome to our channel. Can you say something about your gym?
Yeah, sure. Well, what I do here is we do classes. We do personal training as well. We take group workouts up to 30 people in this room. We do HIIT training, strength and conditioning, all that sort of good, like kind of postural aligning stuff. Mm-hmm. So we put a lot of emphasis on form and technique here because we really understand that if you're doing it wrong, there could be some postural consequences by training incorrectly.
Fantastic. We at the Spinery, we worked at a rather large gym in the City West area. We had about 10 or 15 trainers we worked with personally. And one of the problems we found, especially after like January, February, March, the attrition rate would go down. And I was always curious about that. Yeah, you'd probably notice that. You've been in this for 15, 20 years, right? And so we went and we started doing surveys with these people and trying to figure out why, if exercise is so good and so beneficial, and they get that, why would they stop, why would they discontinue? And here's what we found out. We found out that most of them were going into chronic pain.
It's interesting.
It's very interesting. And the reason why most people go into chronic pain is because they're exercising out of alignment. So today, folks, we really want to talk about exercising in alignment. So there's many pieces to the puzzle for longevity and health. And exercise is a big piece of the puzzle. But we want to look at like exercising, we want to make sure you're exercising in perfect balance and perfect alignment. So we're going to keep this real simple. We're going to do some really rudimentary exercises. Things we're going to look at is core, strength, and alignment. And so we're going to just do a couple exercises. Patrick's going to do these exercises. Are you okay with that, Patrick?
Absolutely, sounds
fantastic, great. Okay, so let's get going. So I got a couple questions I got to ask you, Patrick. And the thing is, let's say I'm an average punter, new person just come into your gym for the first time. And I want to, before I get in, everybody wants to start working those the mirror muscles, the front muscles. They want to look good on the beach. But before you do that, you want to get the form right. And so how do you teach, what recommendations do you give someone upon first arriving here in terms of form?
Well, I suppose one of the first hurdles that we have is that people are more kind of focused on the aesthetics when they kind of come in. They want to work the pecs, they want to work the beach muscles, the biceps, the triceps. But really to kind of do that effectively, you need to kind of start from the ground up. And I suppose in training terms, the ground up would kind of be your core, I suppose, and having good stability and, good alignment when you're doing exercises. We see it a lot of times in kind of commercial gyms, and you were saying there earlier, the kind of drop-off rate is pretty much because they're not doing things right. So we wouldn't really be on the front line with any of that because we're kind of monitoring people, definitely on personal training. We're there hands-on to make sure people are kind of moving correctly. So what we do see when people kind of come in is that they might be a little bit gung-ho. They'll jump in and they'll just think that a push-up is just, pushing something away from them. They'll think that a squat is just holding a weight in some fashion and dropping down towards the floor. But you and I both know that there's a lot more going on mechanically if you want to kind of work the glutes, if you want to get good core tension when you're doing all of these things. So, it's kind of about breaking that down for people and we have to kind of see them move, I suppose.
Right. I think what we need to do is develop a ground rule first, because there's a lot of words and a lot of terms that get bounced around out there, and the thing core now is kind of trending, and a lot of well-meaning people, when you ask them, especially like physios and doctors and chiropractors, they talk about the core, they talk about the muscles in and around here. But I think if you really think about it, and where we come from, biomechanics experts, we look at the core as any muscle that it connects to the hips, above, and this is where it gets really trippy, above and below. Okay, and so what we're seeing now is and we break that down into 29 different muscle groups, and we want to get the key thing with the core is, and I'm sure I'd like to get your input on this, is we see from our point of view, from our design, is that we want all movement to come from the hips. And so I don't care if you're doing a bicep curl, I don't care if whatever you're doing, you got to start at the foundation first.
Absolutely, you need that tension.
Fantastic. Okay. Now here's the other second question. Okay, so the second question was, suppose I've been going to another gym or something, and I've developed bad habits, and I've been at this for a while, and I come into you and I say, yeah, I'm well versed in this. But you could see they have a head translation. Their anterior chain muscles are going short, which is the biggest problem on the planet today. Everybody's going short on the front. The posterior chain's going long. The head's translating forward. They're sitting at a job like this all day long, working at a desk, and they want to come in and they want to exercise. They want to just jump right in because they've been doing it. How do you reframe them?
Well, I mean, it is the most obviously common sort of problem that we have nowadays is that nobody kind of works backwards, typing at desks or anything like that, Everything is rounded forward, a lot of internal rotation, a lot of kyphosis kind of happening, there all the time. So, I mean, really it's just about kind of, we don't, some places you go to, they might go like 60% pulling exercises to try and correct that. But obviously we don't want to create imbalances. So we do actually a lot of mobility here as well to try and open up, I suppose, kind of the frontal planes.
Right.
We do a lot of, latissimus kind of packing exercises, and we do try and work a lot of pulling motion to try and basically kind of correct that sort of forwardly rotated shoulders, try and correct the posture, try and get yourself, you might even get an inch or two taller, you never know, if you kind of do it right. But it is tough, but it is like, it's 50% mobility, and, what I suppose maybe 1/3 mobility, 1/3 trying to restructure the lifestyle, I suppose, habits that's giving them this issue.
Yeah.
I suppose kind of like, you can empty the sink, but you also need to turn off the tap,
right.
sort of thing. And then it's just kind of strength and conditioning to try and actually mold people back.
Yeah.
Into
Now,
position.
that's you just hit on something there, and it's almost a literal landmine. People sit at their desk all day long, and they don't move, and then it's a bit of schizophrenia going out there because they go out and then they see, it's like if they had a brand new car and they drove it hard and fast out of alignment, it would cause all kinds of carnage down the road, right? Yeah. But they sit all day and then they go out and they train really hard, like 3 times a week or 5 times a week. But the problem is, that's going to become a bigger problem down the road. Because this is a piece of the puzzle. It's such an essential part of the puzzle is good exercise. But you gotta maintain that kinetic chain while you're working, you're standing, you're sitting. And so, because otherwise, why bother? If you don't have good posture while you're working, while you're standing, brushing your teeth, you're just going to keep developing these patterns, and you're going to come to the gym, and you're going to bring that pattern to the gym, and chances are you're going to fall off because you're going to get hurt.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It does. I mean, being out of alignment, being in a bad position, it does sort of, I suppose, compound itself over time. I suppose if you think about sitting down in a bad position, I mean, your weight, the further you slouch forward, the more weight is actually going to pull you forward. As you kind of come forward, your kind of center of mass. So, I mean, it does sort of make itself kind of worse. So you do need to kind of correct it from both sides.
Yeah.
You got to fix it, and you got to kind of stop. You got to remedy it as well.
Back in the 80s when I was first started training, without the induction of technology and people sitting, and people sit and they go to work and they sit and they go home, they're on the phones. I worked in medicine, chiropractic, and physiotherapy. The ratio was 1-to-1. But I'm almost of the mindset now, especially in the last 5 years, because of the anterior chain going short and tight and the posterior chain going longer. I think it almost should be 5-to-1. And I know that sounds so radical. Sounds so radical. But I think we need to push back and.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose, in personal training, stuff like that, that's kind of, if you do see sort of a real bad alignment issue, you would almost bring in that sort of ratio, of trying to kind of work backwards, I suppose, instead of kind of working forward, and you have to kind of overcome kind of people's mindsets where they think they spend so much time there, they almost want to train in that sort of kind of realm as well. So there is like a little bit of kind of breaking down sort of habits, movement patterns, all of that sort of stuff, and kind of starting fresh with people almost. Yeah,
it's kind of like through muscle memory and doing things right at the gym and doing things right at home. It's like that movie. Was it Karate Kid? Yeah. Wax on, wax off. You're developing muscle memory, and then you're going to start developing really good patterns and really good habits. So I am so excited, and I hope you can show us. We're going to go through a couple exercises, and Patrick is going to show us how to be biomechanically sound. So let's get right to that. So Patrick just agreed to do one of my favorite exercises, the squat. And the thing I like about squat is because you're going to engage the core, and you're going to be stretching and strengthening at the same time. And it's kind of funny because like with the squat, I probably need to get a hobby, but I could look at anyone's quadriceps or hamstring muscles, and I can almost prophetically tell them what kind of lifestyle they're going to have when they retire, when they get older, how long they're going to live, because there's all kinds of studies with biomarkers. But the thing is with exercise, especially with the squat and getting these big foundation muscles that you're sitting on all day long at home and at work, getting these things nice and strong, it's building escrow. You're building, you want to get these nice and strong so you have a nice retirement so you can live longer, because over the age of 30 or 40, you start losing anywhere between 3 and 8%. Now, new studies are showing you're losing 10% every decade. And so what you want to do is you want to build that up. You want to build that up so you don't have anything to worry about. And so we're going to go through the mechanics, and we're going to use a kettlebell, which I think is, in my humble opinion, I think is the best way to do a squat. Okay?
Yeah. Kettlebell is a fantastic little tool. I think that personally, I would think that similar to doing like a front squat, it does help kind of keep your body kind of upright throughout the movement. You need to have like a little bit kind of different mechanics, a little bit stronger mechanics in the posterior chain to kind of do like a back squat. It's a little bit easier to kind of get it wrong, I suppose. So like, a front held, or also called a goblet squat, would be like a good exercise that we would start with people. It's a little bit easier to kind of hit the nail on the head when you're doing it.
Fantastic.
Okay, so as always, we want to, make sure we load the quads when we pick up the weight. Okay, what we're going to do is going to hold it out in front. And I do find with certain people, it's kind of going to be a little bit of, I suppose, variation in range away from the chest, where people might kind of hold the kettlebell, do you know what I mean, to kind of get the depth. But really you want to be kind of working on the mechanics and the mobility that you can kind of hold the kettlebell right in at the chest, kind of close to your center of gravity. Okay, I suppose the benefit, what we're really trying to do in the squat is to try and stay like as upright kind of as we can. We want to kind of keep the core engaged and really kind of activate the glutes all the way through, because they're the things, as you said, Lawrence, that tend to, they tend to fatigue over time and atrophy.
Yeah. So in other words, if you're looking at him from the side, his ears are over the shoulders, the hips, the knees, ankles, and everything's in a pretty good line. His spine has its nice curves, so the spine acts like a coil or spring.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, and the idea is to kind of come straight up and straight down in like an x-axis, yeah?
Fantastic.
So, take a relatively wide stance, okay? Some people make the mistakes of being a little bit too kind of, close stance in the feet. So, relatively wide stance. We're going to inhale through the nose and try and stay nice and upright. Okay, now the first thing we want to do is sort of, simultaneously sort of pop the knees forward slightly as we start to sit back. I think that the mistake a lot of people do make is they tend to sit back way too much in a squat, and it almost ends up being kind of like a deadlift.
Right.
So what we want to do is sit back, inhale, drop down towards the ground, stand up nice and tall, exhale, and then driving up through the heels. And you can see like all the way through, I'm trying to stay relatively tall. I'm trying not to kind of round. I'm trying to keep that kind of neutrality in the spine all the way through. As I come up, I drive through the heels, try and really activate those glutes, feel it in the glute, tense the glutes on the way up, and try and like basically lock out my pelvis without really kind of locking out the knees at the exact same time. So exhale nice and sharply. On the way up, trying to get that diaphragmatic breathing, that kind of assist in the core to try and get me up and get me locked out on top.
That was brilliant. Can we go into now the push-up?
Absolutely.
Oh, fantastic. Okay.
Absolutely. Well, I think one thing that people really don't realize in a push-up is that it's very, there's a lot more to it than just getting down onto the ground.
Absolutely.
And pushing yourself up and down, as the kind of name will kind of suggest. Really what you're trying to do is that you're trying to hold like core contraction almost all the way through the exercise, especially kind of like on the way up, on the, what's the concentric part of the exercise as you kind of push yourself away from the ground. You're almost trying to like maintain like almost like a plank position all the way through it, trying to get that core tension in so that you're kind of relatively rigid throughout the movement, because you do see when people do push-ups, they kind of start to waver at the top and the bottom, and they start to kind of bend in the hips kind of forward and backwards. The hips drop at the bottom, the bump comes up into the air at the top, and you just don't really have good core contraction down through your spine and hips.
Pulling up on the transversal abdominis, the pelvic floor muscles, and really important with this is to get these muscles here, because this area here called the serratus muscles. These are ones that people are losing a lot, like fast, because they're sitting too much. So when we incorporate that as well into the push-up, I think we have the perfect exercise.
Absolutely, yeah, because people are kind of just doing very static kind of push-ups like that. They're not bringing that kind of serratus in there, by kind of driving through and like really using the shoulder blades. So that's an absolutely fantastic tip to throw in there as well.
Okay, great. So we're going to go ahead and do this, and let's take a look.
Okay, so now time to put the talk into practice. And I'm basically just going to kind of show you a couple of reps of a push-up and basically what we're trying to do. Now you can actually see the position I'm in now would be kind of a very common incorrect way to kind of do a push-up that we see kind of a lot when people are kind of starting off. So what they do is they kind of just tend to do sort of like face plant towards the floor. And I think that's kind of enough. You know, I'm working the pecs, I'm working the triceps, I'm working the shoulders, but they're not getting any of that core element of it. And that's actually going to be a very dangerous sort of mechanical range to be working the shoulder. So what you want to be is, you want to be forward and getting that core tension all the way through. So you're kind of squeezing the glutes, hips are forward, stomach is nice and tight. And you try and hold on to that. As you inhale, sink down, chest kind of comes just forward of the thumbs, pinching the shoulder blades, exhale and driving through. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to work the serratus as well and get that kind of benefit by kind of like, you know, driving the shoulder blades forward from that kind of pinched position at the back, okay? And that, you know, doing it off the knees would be sort of a progression or regression to a full push-up. So the progression would be then a full push-up again, tight glutes, tight stomach, hips forward, inhale through the nose, exhale, nice sharp diaphragmatic exhale on the way up to try and get that extra kind of core tension and to stay rigid. So it does help almost to kind of think of somebody coming up and like jumping on your back at any moment. I mean, what would you do? You'd really try and lock out and stabilize and become like a solid bridge all the way through the movement, and that's what's going to give you that extra benefit doing the push-up.
So now we're going to do the shoulder press, right?
Traditionally, okay, dumbbells up, just front of the shoulders. I like to hold a nice 45-degree angle, a little bit more relaxed in the mechanics of the shoulder. Inhale through the nose, again, tight stomach, tight core. Exhale, diaphragmatic breathing, trying to create a nice straight line overhead. Inhale on the eccentric phase, all the way back down to that kind of resting position.
Fantastic. So that's really good form. But what I'm going to do, Patrick, today is I'm going to bring my world, where I come from, into your world. Okay.
Awesome. I'm here
and so we're going to look at the kinetics here. And so we want to look at we want to engage again from the core, right? So we want to engage the anterior and posterior chain and do this exercise from the hips. That sounds kind of crazy, doesn't it? But here's how we do it. Okay. So if we look at over here, the head's translating a little bit forward, and he's hinging a bit off of here right now. This part of your back, there's a little sore right there, isn't it?
Tight, yeah.
And the muscles down here real tight. So what we're going to change one thing here. What we're going to do is we're going to increase that angle like that. Now, can you see that out there? Can you see that? Can you see where his head went back over his shoulders? The ears now are over the shoulders and hips. And so now he's engaging his pelvic floor muscles, the lower abdominal muscles. The balance is there, okay? And so now he's dispersing the weight throughout the entire chain, anterior and posterior chain muscles. Well, let's now try it again. See if that makes a difference. Isn't that radically better?
It does feel a lot more comfortable.
It's so much better because you're, you know, if you think of muscles, especially everything that attaches to the pelvis, each muscle is a pulley, and any pulley system works better if you're using more pulleys. And so if you can engage all the pulleys when you do this, and it's all about setting up. So like, and I'm sure Patrick would agree with me on this, but before you do any exercise, you want to stop, pause for a second, and make sure those kinetics are right. Your everything's in alignment. You want to make sure you're engaging your core muscles. And so here's the trick here. If you're doing any seated exercise, make sure your hips are above your knees. It's that simple, right? Now watch, I want you to pay attention to Patrick's head where it is, and look at how his posture is going to change in 1 second. It's going to go short on the front, long in the back, and here we go. Ready? Did you see it? And you feel it. It feels awful, doesn't it?
Yeah, my chest.
But that's normal for most people. Most people sit like that, and that feels normal for them. And so once you get used to developing that muscle memory, it just feels so natural. And so when you come out here, you're exercising with Patrick, and then you go to your office, you're not going to want to sit the way you're sitting. You're going to sit engaging your core muscles, engaging these pelvic floor muscles, bringing things up. You want to use the anterior chain, the posterior chain, and making sure everything's balanced. Your ears over your shoulders, your hips, and you're sitting perfectly. So let's do this again. And that's perfect technique.
So I suppose the only problem I would see would be the obvious one, is that most gyms wouldn't have this sort of apparatus below me.
Yeah, I was anticipating that question. I'm glad you asked. Very few people ask that question. Okay, so the same rule applies. Okay, here we go. Ready? You just have to improvise. You just use your imagination, be creative. Okay, so let's take you back to this awful posture. Like that. Okay? Now the same rule applies. Try to get those knees down below your hips. Now slide forward just a little bit. Bring those knees down. Bring this in here like this.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah. And so again, he's going long in the front and long in the back, ears over the shoulders, the hips. right?
Same feeling, same sensation.
Same thing, same thing. Okay, now we're going to do a pull-down exercise, and I asked Patrick. Patrick has all the equipment, any equipment you can imagine, upstairs, downstairs. But we want to do this really low tech today, especially for you punters at home. So we're going to do a pull-down, and notice his form is absolutely perfect. You see again that his ears over his shoulders, the hips. He's engaging the front muscles and the back muscles. And here we go. Let's take a look at this.
Yeah, I think the band is a good kind of thing to show you as well, because it's not like within a fixed range like on a machine. So I suppose technically more can go wrong, So
Correct.
It's a good thing to kind of demo off. So with the lat pull down, I'm trying to really kind of like focus mainly on the lats, and they're kind of the muscles, so the wings kind of like underneath the armpits that kind of pull the arm down. Really what I'm trying to emphasize is kind of bringing the shoulder blades kind of down and back, trying to focus on that sort of area, thinking about kind of being quite loose in the top of the shoulders and through the chest as well. Okay, so the main thing is you want to kind of make sure that your arms are kind of fairly symmetrical. So you have an overhand grip, that's not going to be a problem though on a machine. Inhale through the nose again, then exhale, pull down, elbows come kind of packed back, pinching the shoulder blades, pulling the shoulder blades down. Inhale, release. Exhale, pulling down, again nice and tight, pinching back, and then inhale, release.
So this is kind of really cool because Patrick here thinks about the muscles and performance, and he's certainly an expert in that. And this guy over here thinks about the joints and the alignment and the spine and how these. So this I'm really enjoying this conversation. Now, when I go into gyms, I see sometimes the form in this particular exercise goes off a little bit, where people push forward here, and I'd like to get your thoughts on that, Patrick.
Well, I suppose, the thinking is that it's going to kind of activate the lats a little bit more. Mm-hmm. And if you do sort of drive the chest out, you're getting a little bit more kind of scapular kind of retraction back there, and a little bit more kind of sinking of the scapula. It's going to work the lower lats a little bit more. But I would say that, it could have a little bit of a posture benefit, but you wouldn't want to overdo it. You get a lot of people when they're back like this, and they're basically doing like, a forward row, because now they're kind of coming from 45 degrees.
Yeah.
Well, I would say just like, like a very slight bit of sort of tilt up in the chest, a little bit of back extension, just a tiny bit might kind of help kind of work the lower lats, but it wouldn't be something that like, I would overindulge with and lean right back into it.
Yeah.
I do think, being very forward and core engaged in like, a lat pull down exercise isn't going to give you, I think, as much benefits the lats, even though it would be kind of stimulating the core like a little bit more. But you're a little bit more kind of focused on posterior chain here, I suppose. So that's kind of why I would feel that, kind of giving like a very slight little bit of tilt. Exhale as you pull down, almost like you're trying to lift the chest. It really does help to kind of get that compression, I suppose, in the back. And we're trying to work those muscles that we discussed earlier are really, I suppose, being forgotten about as we start to become very, very, very rounded. So we're trying to go for the exact, we become rounded and upward, and we're trying to pull back and bring down. I think that kind of little, I suppose, kind of coming out of alignment a little bit to help kind of bring it back, I think would be kind of a good idea to bring.
Okay, so you want my opinion on this?
Absolutely. Right or wrong. Okay. That's why you're here.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with everything you're saying. But the one thing I see is, and this is like cosmic, because everyone is having this, is the transitional going from your mid back to your low back in an area. I think I'm going to get a little technical here, but T12 L1 if you want to look on the internet, and those joints. If you look at the joints at T12, the above joints are diametrically different than the joints below. And so you have the top joints like this, and they get about 4 or 5 degrees of movement, and the bottom ones are curved or J-shaped. They only get about 1 degree. So when you overextend here and you're doing a weight training exercise like this, it's not necessarily a good thing for that T12 area, and you start breaking down. So you want to make sure that you don't overextend if you're putting that much pressure on that area.
I suppose the greater the load, the greater the risk.
That's right. But I'm all for, and I want to be crystal clear on this, I'm all for anything that you start pushing back and go into extension. For example, lying on the floor on your elbows or anything, you're standing up and just stretching this out. Stretch this out throughout the day. Just keep stretching this out. And the key thing is, if you're sitting at home or sitting in the office, the best thing you could do is get up every 15 minutes. Just a mere action of just standing up and sit back down again. But if you're going to stand up, stretch, go into extension. And when you're sitting, for God's sakes, make sure your hips are higher than your knees.
And just a quick question for you. I mean, would there be any sort of, like, I suppose, feedback that you would have in your body that might kind of signal you that you are kind of coming back a little bit too far?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the problem there is, if you look at sensory of the nerves, and sensory, if you did a pie chart of the spinal nerves, sensory, depending on the study, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10%. So it's minutia. And sensory is how you touch, taste, smell, feel, see, hear. It's just a small piece of the puzzle. You don't feel. And this is where dentists have it much easier, because you can see your teeth, but you can't see your spine. So you can't see that friction happening. You can't see that wear and tear. And generally, if you're overextending and you're hitting that T12 area, you're going to get it right in the butt cheeks. You're going to feel like sciatica sometimes, or sometimes even. Here's the crazy thing. The thing I'm seeing is, and I don't think anyone else is seeing this, is the anterior tibialis. The muscles right down in here. Because once the body starts adapting to this modern posture, and this modern posture in the last 4 or 5 years, where we're going short in the front, long in the back, the on-off switch is the anterior tibialis. So if you're starting to get pain in the like shin splints and pains in here, chances are you're hitting that spot too much.